Good afternoon. I'm Jesse Landry, founder with the Australian Business Executive, the voice for business in Australia. Today, we're in the offices of Trinity P3, Global Marketing Management Consultants, and we're joined by their CEO, Darren Woolley. Darren, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for being here, Jesse.
Very welcome. So today we're talking with Darren just about areas and differences around B2B marketing, because as a multinational, he works with corporations in a lot of spaces to solve different problems around their issues related to marketing. So, Darren, is B2B marketing just marketing?
Well, superficially, yes, but there are some fundamental differences. It's interesting because recently there's been a trend back toward people saying, well, it's just marketing, isn't it?
So, what does that mean? What makes it different?
Well, I think, going back to consumer goods and fast-moving consumer goods, they have customers and they have consumers. And B2C is business to consumer, but their customers are the retailers, which is actually B2B. And they traditionally separated it because the relationships with consumers and the relationships with customers in that case are quite different. And I think that's why the idea of B2B as being a very different discipline actually grew out of that.
So what does it actually mean then? What is the role of B2B marketing?
Well, B2B marketing in its pure form is about driving customer engagement and sales for the business. I mean, all marketing is about actually generating growth and wealth for a business by engaging customers. But in B2B, it's because the relationship is often seen as different in that you're dealing with one company, one business to another business. Whereas B2C is about a corporation dealing with individuals. Now, traditionally, it was sales driven, but what we're seeing is a move away from that and putting more of a balance between marketing and sales.
So it's an interesting area that you propose, because I remember going back maybe about a decade when social media like Facebook came up and everyone said, oh, you need to have a Facebook page, you need social media, you need Twitter. And this concept was taken up by a lot of B2B organizations as well, who demanded that they needed to have a presence. But in a lot of B2B spaces, these aren't consumer-facing products. So really, what is the role of B2B marketing in areas like social media?
Well, social media is incredibly important because when you look at B2B, it actually is focused around building relationships. Now, even though we call it business to business, the people within those businesses are people. And they are going to be on Facebook, and they will especially be on LinkedIn. And so social media plays such an important part of building relationships between businesses by building relationships between people. And this is where certainly social media can be a tool of salespeople, but it can also more powerfully be the tool of the organisation's marketing strategy.
So when we talk about B2B versus B2C then, does that mean that the messaging has to change because the marketing is more relationship-based? Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I think B2B is certainly about relationship building. And so the messaging and even the strategy has to change because it has to be about building the environment of trust and mutual alignment around what this relationship represents. You could argue that B2C can also have relationship building, but it's not on the same level in that the relationship is between a brand and the consumer. Whereas in B2C, because of the interaction of people, it's more person to person. It's just that each of those people represents an organisation or a brand.
And so in the B2C space, we see a lot of above-board marketing. Is that still relevant? Wouldn't sales be more important or relevant in a B2B environment?
A lot of organisations do put more focus on sales because ultimately that's where the money hits the till. That's where the sale is actually closed and the funds are transacted. It's the work that happens before that through marketing that actually is where the biggest value is coming from. If a salesperson goes in and starts building a one-to-one relationship in a B2B relationship, and the marketing has already set up that trust and that sense of belonging or alignment, then the sales are going to work much better. And this is where marketing should actually lead sales into closing that deal.
I can assume that you've dealt with that issue a lot, but it's consistently an issue that's raised when we speak to organizations, that marketing and sales don't talk to each other. Sales is sort of the cowboy and marketing is the nice, pretty thing. How do you sort of integrate those, or what issues do you tend to deal with in this space?
Well, I think the biggest problem in that area is that often businesses will set up totally different KPIs for sales and marketing. Or they'll set up the KPIs so they're competitors with each other. They'll be competing for budget, when in actual fact, the two should be working hand in glove. Sales and marketing should be working together, identifying targets, putting communications and marketing materials into the marketplace that are going to attract people to the brand, attract other businesses to the brand, and then working with sales to make sure that any leads are going from warm to hot to selling, and both taking a contribution or seen as contributing to that. Whereas too many times, because they're competing with each other, the salespeople go, well, that sale is because of me and it's got nothing to do with marketing. And the marketing people are going, well, I gave you all those leads. Oh yeah, but most of them were hopeless. We set them up not to actually work together.
So is it appropriate then to have targets around marketing the same way that you would at sales, with sort of your end of month or quarterly targets then?
Both should have the same targets. Both parties should be working and have shared common targets. And that should be about not just hitting their sales numbers, marketing and sales, but also sales contributing and being part of the marketing structure to build things like measures of propensity to buy or desirability of the brand, because the two actually impact each other.
So would you have an example of how this is done? Because it's great in theory, but we know that most organizations can't get this to happen.
And they struggle with it because most organizations are either sales focused or they're marketing focused. And yet the ones that work really well have actually pulled those two together.
So do you have to go into businesses and sort of identify this left brain sales, right brain marketing thing to make them cohesive? And how is that done in practice?
Well, the way to do this is when we're called in, because often we're called in by marketers. You have to remember that the marketers within B2B organisations are often seen to be underperforming because they're not given any of the credit for the sales contribution. So they'll bring us into the organisation. Our role is then to look at how can we better align the resources within the organisation, and that's through how does the strategy work? Do they have common strategy to common KPIs? Are they incentivised the same way? And the other thing that's happening is that increasingly marketing and sales have got an extra competitor, and that is online.
Okay. So that's a really good segue that you brought up in terms of online. I mean, where does the strategy for B2B marketing head when not only do we have digital and online channels now, but the marketing opportunities are so segmented now?
And look, the biggest risk or fear for salespeople is that in an e-commerce world, what is the role of sales in that? So marketing is actually about driving traffic to the e-commerce site. And e-commerce works in B2B as well as it works in B2C, right? So, in some ways it starts to minimise the importance of sales when you move into that environment. So marketing actually becomes the driver of revenue because the transaction happens through e-commerce.
So Darren, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure.
And if you'd like to stay up to date with all opportunities in Australian business, head to theabe.com.au and click subscribe.